22 veterans a day commit suicide. And so to raise awareness, this is the 22 Push-Up Challenge. I've been nominated by Maurice Schessel and Nick Wong, but I'm not going to do the push-ups. Not because I don't think this movement is significant, because I want to contribute in my own way. As a survivor of somebody who's had both a family member and a friend commit suicide. The two people in my life who committed suicide were James Mackenzie, a soldier I trained, and who hung himself at the age of 19. And the second person was my grandfather, who raised me from when I was 12 onwards. And at the age of 92, he jumped off a 10-story balcony. Now, why would I provide these details? It's not to be sensationalizing the gore, but rather to show that I want to help survivors overcome the taboo and guilt that comes with having been a survivor of suicide. If a loved member dies of cancer, there's no shame involved. We're not afraid to discuss the details. We can mention how they had stage 4 lung cancer. If somebody's killed in a car accident, we can discuss how they were hit by a truck on the 401. When it comes to suicide, it's almost like they just disappear. We don't talk about it. We don't have to talk about the details. And so I want to talk about my experiences to help survivors deal with this. We talk a lot about people reaching out and getting help, prevention, offering love and support, and having people seek medical help and the help of trained professionals. But what often isn't discussed is what to do with survivors. I'm going to focus on the death of my grandfather because it sort of encapsulates this issue perfectly. In the Chinese community, there's a great deal of shame that comes with suicide. If my grandfather had died of cancer, there would have been no shame. We would have mourned his passing. We would have remembered his life, and we would have moved on. But because he committed suicide, it's almost as if he just disappeared. We don't talk about it. It's so shameful. And the reason why there's often shame and guilt is with the perception of choice. If something happens where you had no control of the situation, where you had no ability to make a choice, there's not a lot of guilt or shame. What could you have done? If my grandfather had cancer, that was beyond our control. If my grandfather had been hit by a lightning bolt, we wouldn't have as much guilt, because what could we have done? But for some reason, because he took his own life, because he killed himself, there's a lot of shame, because we felt that we could have done something. A lot of my family members still blame themselves. They feel if they had been there, they could have stopped him. Now, it is true, a certain percentage of people who attempt suicide, if there is an intervention, it is highly likely they will commit suicide again. But there is also another percentage of people who, regardless of circumstance, will inevitably commit suicide. And my grandfather was one of those. If we had intervened before he had jumped, if we had seen him in time, it is highly likely he would have found another way. He just would have taken another opportunity. When he committed suicide, it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. He saw an opportunity, he was alone for a second, and he took his chance. I've had a much easier time dealing with his death than perhaps some of my other family members, because I've come to realize that there was no ability to choose. There was no choice in the matter. It was inevitable. This was no different than him having cancer. We accept the fact that with cancer, again, despite medical intervention, despite all the love and support, a certain percentage of people will die. If a doctor told you that cancer had a 100% survival rate, you'd be incredulous. Well, suicide is the same way. It doesn't matter what you do, a certain percentage will take their lives. There's nothing you can do about it. But once you realize you did have no choice, it becomes easier to accept. There's less guilt, there's less shame. And that's why I can talk about his death so openly. My grandmother died of cancer. And when I stand in front of their graves, when I stand in front of my grandfather and my grandmother, one who committed suicide, one who died of cancer, my feelings are the same. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how they died. When I think of James Mackenzie, that young soldier I trained who killed himself, it doesn't matter how he died in the end. I still remember him the same way. And that's how you can deal with somebody that you loved and cared about who committed suicide. Their death is just a tiny fraction of their life, and you should not judge their life based on that tiny fraction. You judge them on the majority and how they live their life and how you remember them and your relationship with them. So if you are a survivor of suicide, find others. Seek others who've been through the same. We often talk about the person who committed suicide, but we almost never talk about those who are left behind. You're not alone. There's others out there, and you can reach out to them. I would like to nominate John McGuire as part of the 22 Push-Up Challenge to raise awareness for veteran suicide. And you're free to contribute in any way you want.